Well, our first story we want to get into is the latest with regards to the oil spill, the pipeline, and those that have built on the pipeline. So Heritage is more or less saying, well, look, any structure that is in the pathway of the underground pipeline needs to be demolished. Now, according to the people living there, or at least one of them living there, what they are reported of saying is, they don't really have much structures built on the pipeline. Although they admit that it comes close to their house. But what's interesting is two things. One, they have said that Heritage wanted them to sign something with regards to liability, right? Basically, I think it could be like a waiver saying Heritage is not liable. That's what I think the people are assuming it was. They refused to sign it. Some of the residents are saying this, right? So we don't necessarily know if this is how true this is. But then the other thing is the fact that the residents, again, one of the residents is saying that, look, relocation is the best thing. You know, those that are all around the line have to move, right? Otherwise, they have to move the line. And when he says relocation, maybe it's my assumption, but I'm assuming that he means that Heritage has to pay for the relocation.
Well, I mean, that is what is implied by his messaging. But to be honest with you, I think in this particular instance, Heritage should assist. I would not go against what I suggested a couple of days ago, where both parties involved, all parties involved, bear responsibility for this. Because the family stated they were aware that the pipeline there existed, but they thought, they were under the impression that the pipeline was not commissioned. It was decommissioned years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, one former employee of Petrotrin said, that's not the case. You know, since I've been there, this pipeline has been operational. So that's one. Two, families built their structures there. Their addresses, we assume at least, were registered to that location. Mm-hmm. They've been paying their bills. At least we hope they have been paying their bills. But when all is said and done, if that is the case, Heritage bears responsibility. Because if the families are also stating that sometimes employees of Petrotrin would come and say, you need to hold construction, but never showed up. The mere fact that the families admitted that was happening, and then all of a sudden that just stopped, yet they continued with the construction. Heritage bears responsibility, families bear responsibility. So the question is now, are you going to compensate the families for the structure? Are you, in terms of the value of the property? Are you going to compensate them in terms of the value of the new properties they have to move into? What's going to take place? However, I agree that the family should not be residing there. And in the instance of the letter of no liability, well, in that particular case, it's really up to the lawyers to advise, because, again, from my standpoint, both parties certainly bear responsibility.
Well, and that statement there, the problem is most people are probably assuming in cases like this, it's either one side bears responsibility or the other side bears responsibility. But what you're saying is that no, responsibility is somewhat up the middle, split. It might not be an equal split, right? How do you determine the fairness of who bears more, who bears less, or if it should actually be equal? The fact that the family is saying, well, look, the line was decommissioned and they recommissioned the line. That's interesting. We probably should still look into that just to be sure. But again, it would help if we would find out more with regards to where did they find out this information to help trace the origins or the factual validity of it.
Because you also have to ask yourself, we have to consider all factors. In the instance of Heritage understood that the pipeline was there. Obviously, the families understood that the pipeline was there. They just thought it was decommissioned. But the problem is, Heritage never did anything about it, and the families continued to live their life even though they themselves were aware. If there was no leak or structural damage that caused this, would the families have to be relocated, or would the families still be there? Would Heritage actually act? Would Heritage have done what is responsible of them or should be their duties and obligations and acted? So all of those things you have to consider as well, which is why I suppose they did not sign the no liability claim that was issued to them from Heritage.
I think, right, they would let sleeping dogs lie. And I think this now not only goes to show like a cultural response to responsibility that we probably witness, we just don't know that we're witnessing it in other areas with regards to our public administration. These are lackings with regards to the systems of government now, where heritage will have these criteria with regards to their pipelines underground, and there's no corroborating supporting system with town and country and with utilities that will say, well, no, we can't just allow these things to happen. The resident reported that his father was paying rent and then all of a sudden stopped. It makes me wonder if, again, he was potentially scammed, somebody who claimed, because I don't know how you could claim ownership of the land over the pipeline. So then exactly who is he paying rent to, and how was he able to just stop paying this rent?
Well, that's the
right?
next part. Exactly the deed of the land, whose name is it in? Is it in? All of that has to be considered. This is a very tricky and sticky situation because of multiple factors involved.
Right, the implications, because it's not just about this instance, how we deal with this instance, which will now be highly publicized, will then inform and set precedent of how we'll treat similar situations going down the line. And I don't like the fact that something, at the end of the day, something went horribly wrong, and it's showing that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. You're giving them water and electricity connections over a piece of property that shouldn't even potentially be there, because I believe that even though most of the houses are not built over the pipeline, again, the possibility of relocating all of these families who are built within proximity, close proximity to the pipeline, exists. And then that bill is a lot more than just saying knock down a structure and pay you back for that.
Ask yourself this question. As I said, so many factors, so many avenues, so many considerations. Did the family already admit responsibility and to a certain degree liability? These are legal terms, by the way, so legal definitions are a bit tricky. But did they already admit responsibility and to a certain degree liability over their admittance that they were aware that the pipeline there existed, but they still built? Did they also admit responsibility and, again, to a certain degree liability if they were warned when the infrastructure was actually going up multiple times, but they continued?
I think ignorance of the law is no excuse, whether we like it or not. That is the practice. And you can't just assume that, oh, it's condemned and they stopped showing up. There was no attempt, from what I understand, based on what was reported, right? They didn't say that they went to Petroshin or they went to Heritage to make it clear. And even if the line the function of the line ceases, right? Because they said, well, they recommissioned the line. So what is the actual ruling? Because the line is still there, right? And they should, I would hope. And if they don't, they need to have this. They need to have rules with regards to when is it that a line is not like fully decommissioned. We will never use this again. And if we want to use this again, then it's our bad because we said we're not using it again. What is that process like? Because you can't just assume, why are you assuming, oh, well, they decommissioned the line and they will obviously never use it again? That's not obvious to me. So yes, to your answer, potentially yes.
But at the same time, even though you're saying that there is ignorance to the law, and I understand that, and I agree that there's been ignorance in this entire process, at the same time, does Heritage hold responsibility for not enforcing what should be their own regulations of people bearing construction in the vicinity of these pipelines? You do know that natural gas pipelines, where they run, there are always these yellow columns with signs saying natural gas pipeline underneath. That may not be the case for Heritage lines.
Should be held responsible for the fact that they did not keep up with the monitoring of their own pipeline, of what was built on their pipeline. If that, again, it all depends. What is the actual rules and practices that they're supposed to operate in? So we're assuming that they're supposed to keep that effort up. If that is so, they need to bear the responsibility of not doing so, right? So that's what makes it tricky, because as I think you pointed out when this story initially broke, neither side is 100% in the right here, just based off of what has been reported. But Specific context to the regulations and what the processes should be will help clarify some of it.
There's another,
some of it.
There's another catch to this, Sean. If you were suggesting that there's a possibility that the family was scammed in terms of the land, because we don't know exactly the deed of the land and whatnot, but if the family has been occupying that land for decades and it's not necessarily in their name, the squatters' rights come into play here as well.
I mean, that's real speculation so we don't know exactly with regards to that.
Many things to consider.
Right. So, and again, that's for a judge to figure out, and hopefully we have one of our better judge on one of their better days to sort all of this out, and the lawyers don't mess up with presenting less than important or significant arguments, because that's the other thing. We could get precedents set just because one of the lawyers kind of did a poor job with figuring out what arguments should I be presenting in this matter. But hopefully it could be sorted out, because this, again, will impact down the line. It will probably impact how we view squatters' rights as well. So there's a lot. It's easy to underestimate, but there's a lot to unpack here with regards to how these people are going to be treated. And I just hope that people will have the patience and understanding, assuming that it is done in good faith, whatever it is, that justice is done. But of course, they have to do the work to get the right determination done.
Certainly.